Hey everybody, Marcus C. Williams here. Let's talk about political persecution. Specifically, I want to talk about Alexei Navalny, who was the guy who was chosen to try to rival Putin in Russia. So, we're going to talk about a number of things, but that's going to be the main focus. Alexei Navalny, Putin, and what's going on there. I'd like to start with talking about what's happening to Trump, right? So, love Trump, hate Trump, whatever, right? People have very strong feelings about Trump either way, and some people just don't care either way. But the fact of the matter is that we can see right now that the political rivals that are against him are using things like the Department of Justice against him and his allies. Okay? Now, think that he's guilty? I hear you. Think that he's innocent? I hear you. But the one thing that we can see is that the crimes that he is being charged for, largely, nobody on the Democrat side is being charged with at all. Many of the crimes are decades old that they're trying to charge him with. That's another thing to think about. So, when we see that happen, and it's not just him, right? Because I could talk about the FBI and how they said that anybody that is a Catholic is an extremist. And they put informants and stuff inside Catholic churches and stuff like that. That's a thing. That's political persecution. We could talk about that. We can talk about how the FBI went to look for bank records of people who were buying Bibles and stuff like that. That's political persecution. Without warrants and stuff like that, going through people's bank records to see who's buying Bibles and stuff. Are you serious, bro? Are you serious? Let me pause, because talking about that, specifically the attack on Christians, because I am a Christian, it really bothers me. But that's besides the point. Back to the situation at hand. We are seeing political persecution across the United States of America. Whether it's Trump, whether it's a local official or whatever, if you're not going with the mainstream narrative or whatever the case is, and you've made some enemies in the state, or they want to use you as, and when I say state, I mean federal government, and they want to use you as an example, they're going to use you as an example. And it's very, very, very alarming. And people should be concerned. But they'll say, oh, well, Trump is a bad guy, so it's not that big a deal. It's not that big a deal? Because you don't like him? You really need to sit with that. Because when it happens to somebody that you do like, then it'll be a problem. But unfortunately, lately in America, over the last couple of years, we've had way too much of that going on. Stuff that's either unconstitutional or just generally unjust in anybody's thought process has been continuing to happen, but people say, oh, well, they're the other side, so it's okay for them to do that to them. No, it's not okay for them to do that to anybody. To paraphrase Thomas Paine, I'll fight for anybody's right as much as I'd fight for my own right. Okay? This is a very dangerous line of thinking that we are going about in our nation. So now, and I bring up the Trump persecution and prosecution and stuff like that because it goes very much so hand in hand with what's happened to Alexei Navalny. Okay, and you might not know the history of Alexei or what the situation is. I'll give you a brief synopsis. Long story short, he wanted to start a separate party from the main party in Russia. He ran for a couple offices, then he ran for mayor of Moscow, basically trying to say, when he ran for mayor of Moscow, he tried to really put down Putin and stuff like that, or whatever the case is. And that's kind of where he started to really get on Putin's bad side. Then Putin tried to, and I can't say it was Putin, and I'm not able to say it was Russia, but I mean, geez, it really looks like it was. They attempted to kill him. They tried to stab my man. No, matter of fact, that was the other guy. They actually killed that guy. Russia has a habit of killing people that go against the government. Another scary parallel to what's happening in the United States lately. but they tried to poison him. Okay, they tried to have people assassinate him multiple times. There was a big row one time when they poisoned him and he was going to Germany or whatever the case was. And Germany tried to get him to come there to go to the hospital or whatever. And then he basically had temporary asylum there, but then decided to go back to Russia some years ago. When he went back to Russia, they put him in prison. Trumped up charges, I don't know, but the Russian government is very, what's the word that I'm looking for? Very much so a holdover from the thought process of many of the ways of doing stuff in the Soviet era. Yeah, that's a good synopsis of it. So he was in prison in a camp in the Arctic Circle. So way, way, way up north. That's what they do. They put political dissidents up there and stuff like that. Now, the interesting fun fact there is he just died, right? He just died. They don't know how he died or whatever the case is. He died when his wife, who is not a politician, who has nothing to do with security, who has nothing to do with the military, is at the Munich Security Conference. Now, hold on now. Let me lay this out for you. The supposed person to be a face for leading against Putin in Russia just so happened to die at the same time that they're trying to push this money through for Ukraine and NATO, okay, to fight against Russia, but also at the same time that concern about Ukraine is wavering, but also at the same time that his wife is at this security conference, which she has no relation to anything to do with security. She's not a politician. She hasn't worked in the military. She doesn't do anything about security. None of that. Why is his wife there at all? Why is she there? Why is she there? She just so happens to be there now. Just magically, miraculously. Happens to be there now at the Munich Security Conference. Happens to. All of these things seem to line up all at once. And he just so happened to die. Now, I'm not saying that Russia or Putin or a bad actor as a guard or just general neglect isn't how this man died. But I'm saying that the timing is incredibly peculiar. All of those stars just aligned, just right, at that right time. While his wife is in Munich at the security conference, which is for the heads of states and the heads of the various militaries and stuff in Europe and the Western world and America and Australia and such. It's baffling. She just happened to be there. Support for Ukraine just happens to be wavering. Support for funding Ukraine just happens to be wavering. And he just happened to die when all of these things just happened to align. One would think that it's strongly a possibility that one of the Western states, maybe even the U.S. or possibly Ukraine, might have had a hand in his demise. It's not beyond reason. I mean, all of those things line up all at once. I mean, I'm just asking questions. It seems odd. It seems very, very odd. Now, remember, Putin could have killed him at any time up to this point. If it was him, might still be him. But if it was him, he could have killed him at any point up to this time. He could have killed him at any time after this time. But it just so happens that all of those things align all at once. You gotta make that make sense to me. It doesn't sound right and it doesn't smell right. So when things like this happen, you have to ask yourself, who stands to benefit? So, who stands to benefit? Putin doesn't stand to benefit from that. But Ukraine does, money laundering to Ukraine does, because we already know that most of the money that goes through there, it doesn't get to the people that are struggling and suffering. We know that. That's a fact. We know that many of Zelensky's friends and fellows over there are embezzling the money. That's also a fact. You can look these things up. These are proven facts. We know that Zelensky has gotten rid of almost all of his cabinet. That's also a fact. We know that his own military generals and people are trying to stand up against it to stop the war because they're just losing so many men and it's not worth fighting and all of this other stuff. That's a fact. But they sell us a whole different dream over here. Now, I am not a fan of Putin at all, not even a little bit. Okay. But that man is not a stupid man at all. And if he were to do this at this time, he'd have to be pretty damn stupid, excuse my language. So something else must be afoot. The game is afoot, as Sherlock Holmes says. And it doesn't take you long to start reasoning that he doesn't stand to benefit from this guy dying right now. There's no benefit to him whatsoever. He's in jail. He'd have been in jail for however extra longer, and they could have just made up some more charges to put him in jail even longer. He's in a far-off, deserted compound. Nobody's thinking about him. Nobody's been talking about him. You have not heard about Alexei Navalny before last week, probably. Unless you knew about him from some time ago. But you probably haven't even heard about him ever before. And that's part of the problem, right? Now all of a sudden, Putin's opposition has just been died and Putin probably killed him or whatever. The timing is important. It smells very, very bad. And then they try to say, oh, well, they try to use this, and Nikki Haley's one who's doing this really a lot right now, is trying to say, oh, well, Trump is apologist for Putin and he likes Putin and stuff like that because he said that if the people in NATO didn't pay their share of NATO, of the money, the 2% of their GDP that they're supposed to be paying in NATO, that he wouldn't allow them to, he wouldn't protect them with American troops and American money. He said, as a matter of fact, he'd encourage Russia, do whatever you want. Now, to me personally, I think that that's kind of raw, right? That's kind of a very interesting mentality, borderline. What do you call them? Borderline mafioso. You got a pretty house here. It'd be really a shame if something were to catch fire. You better pay your protection money, but it's not protection money, right? Like, it's the money that they've already said that they'd pay into the conglomerate of defense for NATO. Honestly, if you're asking me, NATO doesn't do a gosh darn thing for the United States. So I'm no fan of NATO. We've already got alliances and treaties with all of these countries individually. So why do we even need NATO? Why? We have all of these other alliances and stuff. Why are we putting all of this money into creating a military that's not even our military? Why are we funding Europe when we're not even part of Europe? Oh, well, the Russians, the Russians what? The Russians don't have enough troops to take and hold any part of Europe. Not one part. Not one. They're not even strong enough to go back and re-get all of the states in the Warsaw Pact that were under the Iron Curtain. Okay, you can go look both of those things up. The Warsaw Pact and the Iron Curtain, if you're not familiar with what those are. They can't even go back to controlling those areas again because they just don't have the manpower. So there's no real threat of them attacking Europe. That's bogus. They try to make it like that's a thing, but they don't have enough people, man. They don't have enough manpower. They don't, and as the news continues to remind us, oh, well, Russia's military is weak and this, that, and third, and they're terrible, and they're losing to this third-rate army that's nobody from nowhere. Talking about Ukraine, right? That's what the news keeps telling us. But if they're so bad, why are you concerned about them going into Europe? It's not likely. Everybody over there is got all types of crazy weapons. It would be a complete horrible situation. It's not likely to happen. Poland's stacked and racked up. They're not going into Poland. That's not happening. Okay? All the other countries over there are stacked and racked up. It's not happening. Okay? It's just not happening. Okay? There are other various ways that they could do it, you know, geopolitical tactics and stuff like that, but that would take years to wear down Europe. So that's not going to happen. But what we do have as an enemy right now is China. And we need to be worried about China and focused on China, but we're focused on Russia. When Russia tried to start a peace treaty before the whole thing even started to get the Donbass and Luhansk and stuff out over there, where the people that are there that were ethnically Russian, that were being massacred, genocided. They were being genocided. That is a whole fact. They were just killing them all up, which is a longer thing about the history of Ukraine and Russia, and I'm not going into that, but that's a real thing. And it goes back to the whole 2014 and overthrow of the Ukrainian government and all of these different things. It's a lot. There's a lot of history there. So if you're not familiar with it, you can't just say, oh, this is that and that is that, because none of it is what's being presented to us in the news. But the fact of the matter is this, period. They're trying to say that Putin killed this guy all of a sudden when all of these stars align. And they're talking about how he's persecuting political rivals. But it's happening in the U.S. They're politically persecuting Trump. They're politically persecuting other people in other states. Okay? They are politically persecuting Carrie Lake, lover or hater. Okay? They are politically persecuting... Oh, poor Mike Lindell. Like that... I know people say, well, he said that this or that and the third or whatever the case is, blah, blah, blah. Man, the way they did Mike Lindell was dirty. Whether you love him or hate him or whatever the case is, they did that man dirty. They did that man dirty. They did his company dirty. And the fact that he just hired so many American citizens, and he was a story of recovery himself, and he hired so many people that most people wouldn't even hire, previous convicts and people that were recovering from drugs and stuff like that. Like the way that they did Mike Lindell and his business and his people was very, very, very wrong. That was nothing but political persecution. Okay? Which is a whole separate conversation. But they're doing it here in America. They're doing it here in America, and you don't have to... And you look at it. You look at the level of corruption here in the government and stuff like that, and you see the 70 people that were arrested in New York City the other day that worked for the government, that worked for the New York City government, that were taking the money and they were running a racketeering thing as far as the bids go for the different contracts with the city. And it's crazy. 70 of them got arrested over that. That's insane. That's insane. I live in Rochester. We got a whole corruption scandal here with with some of these nonprofits, and a whole bunch of missing, misapplied money. Money went here, money went there, all da 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 da. Which doesn't even talk about the tens of millions of dollars that's missing from the schools every year, but that's another conversation. But the fact is that they seem to go after certain people and certain individuals in certain instances when there is little to no basis to go after them as far as legitimacy. And that's not, again, this isn't to say that somebody did or did not do something. It's to say that it's politically thrown out there. So I'll give you an example. You got George Santos and Bob Melendez. Bob Melendez got all of this illegal foreign money, currency, gold bullion, and all types of stuff. And he's still in the Senate now. And George Santos got kicked out for he was definitely a liar. He's a stone cold liar. But Bob Melendez was worse. And allegedly, and this is what allegedly was the issue with George Santos. There's some other stuff too, but allegedly the real thing is that he may have misused some of his campaign funds or whatever the case was. I'm not really in depth in that story. George Santos, no offense to George Santos, he just doesn't very much so interest me. But Bob Melendez was way worse, more malicious. Even Kevin, what's his name? Is it Kevin? Is his first name Kevin? I don't know. Fetterman, the guy from Pennsylvania. Even he said, how can George Santos be being kicked out and Bob Melendez is still in there? That's insane to me, because up to that point, I had never heard him say anything that was really of any value or even made much of any sense. He also had a couple of strokes and stuff like that, but many of the policies that he was taking, I could not agree with. But when he said that, I'm like, yeah, dude, that's right. You're right on. Fetterman, what's up? Like, that's it. But that just shows you that the government has multiple standards of, what would you call, I don't even want to call it justice, because that's not even an adequate term for it, right? Like, I guess. But they have multiple different levels and forms of justice depending on who you are, where you stand, and what your beliefs are, what party you're in. It's concerning. And this is going on right here in the U.S., but we're concerned about what Putin has got going on. Somebody make that make sense. I don't care what Putin's got going on. Okay? I don't care. I tell Putin, you got to deal with China. You kick rocks, because China's about to take over Russia, which is a whole nother conversation, which is 100% a fact. And China's really mad at Russia and Putin after they did that interview with Tucker Carlson, because they gave, basically Putin said that they have claim to, oh my goodness, what's the name of the port? Oh, it starts with a Y. Anyway, it's this port that China says that they have a claim to, that China and Russia had, that China gave Russia in a treaty that they had, and they feel like that it was wrong of Russia to get it. Anyway, there's some stuff there too. So, but China is the bigger enemy. Russia, not so much. And I don't care about what's going on in Russian politics and stuff like that, when the same thing that these news stations here are accusing Russia of, they're doing here in the United States where I live. They're doing in my home. It's scary. And we need to understand that this is real. This is what's going on here. And then they'll tell you that so many coincidences that just seem so happen to line up, that don't believe your eyes or your ears or what you're seeing or what you're hearing, because even though you might think that it's true and it might sound like it's true, it's not true. What we say the narrative is true. And that's just beyond me, that people are really going for this. You guys got to wake up. Remember, the news media and the government are not on your side. They're on their own side. Okay. What did George Carlin like to say? George Carlin used to say, he said, they're part of a club and you ain't in it. And that's what I got for you guys. Remember, you matter. You matter to me. I can't speak for everybody else, but you matter to me. And remember, stand up, speak up, and don't shut up. Take action. I'll catch you later. Be blessed and be well.